And then the other question I wanted to ask you, just to kind of open certain things up, and this is I'm gonna force you maybe to talk a little bit more right now, which is that one of the things, you know, that I'm very interested in, just in terms of your personal history and your experience, and I'm, you know, really happy to have you here sharing so much of yourself and of, you know, what you've lived through. I'm very interested in the kind of the autonomous strain and I know there's a lot of different types of, you know, autonomous. That word means a lot of different things. I'm just interested maybe to hear you talk a little bit about like how that made its way into what you do and what Midnight Notes has done, and then thinking a little bit more about the present day. You talked about the composition of classes or the constitution of things in the United States right now, and just maybe to open a space to have you talk a little bit about how you see that now, if autonomous theory, broadly conceived, still has something to say to you in this particular moment with looking at a current landscape. Just to make a little bit of a space to let you talk a little bit about that aspect of your work and your experience. Or if it doesn't have anything to do with it, just say it.
Brian, I left the United States at a time of terrorism. I did not have the nerve to become an armed, struggled underground guy. This I'm talking about 1969. I took it, you know, at that time, I was thinking, as men were at that time, young men, we were thinking of soldiering. And if we didn't soldier in Vietnam, then to our comrades in our generation, we needed to face similar risks in the United States against the war in Vietnam. That's part of the dynamic of a young man at that time. It's a military thing. So as a militant, you had, you know, that was part of in your head. And I went to, and I said, I am a scholar, and I will go do my risks, etc., in the world of scholarship. And scholarship has always been international. And the working class from the time of Diogenes has always respected the scholar, the person of learning. You know, the person who knows the Quran, or the person who knows scriptures, or the person who knows the Bible or poetry. Sorry?
History.
Yes, it's always been the autonomy, for those who are not too familiar, for us anyway, it meant, for us, our Marxism and our revolution did not come to us from the trade union, and it did not come to us from the political party, either the Trotskyists or the Stalinists, to use the lingo of the early, or the Maoists of the early 70s. We were looking for other, so we thought we should study Das Kapital. And that's what we did over there in London. And we had a great group, you know. And that experience, Brian, was also separate from Edward Thompson. You know, it was another, for him, he thought he knew it all. His reading was through the Stalinist experience. All right, but this is a different generation. I told you, criminalization was very much on our mind, plus the battle for the third world and so on. This is some of the background, Matt. I'm speaking to you. Matt shared with me that he was an Althusserian. So I'm doing like a shout out to him to explain, to explain something. Our group was international there in London, from China, from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from the United States, from Italy. So we, you know, Gramsci was already, you know, entered into the academic blah blah, and wasn't part of the movement particularly, but the so-called Italian autonomists at that time, like Tronti or Alquati or later Negri, who the whole world knows from how he ended up or how he moved, at that time they were closely related to the movement in Torino and Fiat. And Fiat workers they were close to Detroit. Do you see? To Drum, to Elrum. Detroit, after all, and the class struggle there was the hub of a movement around the world, and it was the basis of autonomist Marxism as we understood it and as it grew in Italy. Of course, with other themes, but I want to put that out here because I don't believe it's very well known. And us in Ann Arbor, or in this, quote, Rust Belt, you know, broadly speaking, the auto geography, the geo-auto, because we all are part of the labor market, right, or used to be, for the parts and the assembly of the whole, and the energy and the coal and the oil, all. But the struggle for freedom at the Ford plant, at Cadillac Fleetwood, went right to Turin. And from Turin, those people who I mentioned, Bravo, Ferruccio Gambino, Potere Operaia, Lotta Continua came right out of that. So that's sort of like an egg, or a genesis about the autonomy. Now, since Seattle, I think autonomy's meant something different. It's also, okay, because no longer is a trade union affecting or deciding people's entry into anti-capitalism. No longer is the Communist Party doing that, you know, since the collapse of the Soviet Union. So autonomy means something a bit different, but I'm not as sure what. Certainly alternativism, you know, and it's picked up parts of the old, this is the way I see it anyway, it picks up parts of the old counterculture, you know, in terms of subsistence, in terms of the do-it-yourself movement, in terms of the collectivity of communes, in terms of, okay. What was the next part of your?
It was just to talk maybe a little bit about the today, and how you spoke about the construction of constitution of classes or composition of classes in the present, and that's what the last part of Magna Carta kind of talks a little bit about. And it's really interesting the way you're opening up to all these different, you know, things that we could call movements, or, you know, there are sites for radicality, or, you know, potential sites for an intensification.
Yeah.
You know, and I find that move to really resonate with me, and so I would just be interested in, you can talk a little bit about that, or even talk a little bit, you know, I mean, I know that you've lived in the area for a long time, and maybe just how you see the current, you know, situation, you know, here, you know, in the Rust Belt.
Yeah, well, I'd like to backtrack a minute to correct something. I left a poor impression when I spoke about, and it has to do, when I spoke about the Constitution of the United States. I think, you know, people are speaking about constituting the classes is a worldwide, is a planetary task. You know, the proletariat is international. The working class is international. And so sometimes I will, so I think to speak of our composition means to speak with this struggle elsewhere. And the first is the struggle against U.S. imperialism, you know, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. That's our first, is the terrorism that the U.S. throws upon the world. Mm-hmm. You know, the sister in Lahore who spoke to Hillary Clinton saying, your airplanes are executioners. This is the death penalty. It's arbitrary, it's capricious, it's without trial. It's not war,